Good afternoon. Is this on? Can you hear me? Good afternoon. I am joined today by Boston Police Department Superintendent-in-Chief Greg Long, Chief of Civic Engagement Aisha Miller, Chief of Health and Human Services Marty Martinez, as well as Budget Director and incoming CFO Justin Starrett. Police violence is once again at the center of a national conversation. Our country is gripped by the murder of George Floyd and the trial of Derek Chauvin. And we struggle to process the recent senseless killing of Daunte Wright in Minneapolis. In Boston, our city is also reeling from another kind of unacceptable violence, the tragic killing of Mrs. Delois Brown as she sat on her front porch. I visited the fatal crime scene Saturday evening and again on Sunday morning. It was my first time as mayor, but like the residents on that street, it is something that I have experienced far too many times. I offered the grieving family and her loved ones my condolences, but they deserve much more than that. It is outrageous that a grandmother or anyone cannot sit outside on a beautiful spring day without the fear of being shot to death. Most Boston residents live in a safe, peaceful neighborhood, but too many others live in fear of violence. These fears are exacerbated when any officer fails to respect those they are sworn to protect. As mayor, I am committed to ensuring safety, healing, and justice in every Boston neighborhood. I understand that the fabric of trust between the Boston Police Department and Boston residents has worn thin in parts of our city, especially in communities of color. To repair the fabric that binds our communities together, we must prioritize transparency and accountability. These are foundational values when it comes to fostering public trust. This is especially true for law enforcement. That is why my administration is doubling down on our work to stand up the Boston Office of Police Accountability and Transparency, otherwise known as OPAT. Tomorrow, I will submit an FY22 budget that allocates $1 million to establish this new office. And today, I am proud to announce its first leader. I have named seasoned attorney and advocate Stephanie Everett as Executive Director of the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency. As the Executive Director of OPAT, Stephanie Everett will lead the organization with the authority to review all Boston Police Department internal affair cases, subpoena the release of records, and strengthening police accountability to the people of Boston. My administration is bringing a new era of transparency and accountability to all corners of city government. I have directed the city's law department to immediately review Patrick Rose's internal affairs file and redact any information that could compromise the identities of the sexual assault or domestic violence victims. The victims of these appalling crimes must be protected. But transparency cannot wait any longer. I have ordered the release of these redacted internal affairs files as soon as possible. As we now know, an alleged child molester was allowed to remain on the police force and rise through the ranks of the Patrolmen's Union for 2 decades. As a mother and as a grandmother, I was heartbroken and angry to learn that nothing was done to keep Mr. Rose away from children, or to terminate him, for that matter, after serious charges were found to be credible by a BPD internal affairs probe in 1995. As mayor, the likes of Patrick Rose will not be protected on my watch, and those who are complicit in abuses of power will be held to account. The release of these files is a first step. OPAT will also conduct an independent investigation of the BPD internal affairs system that allowed a police officer to remain on the job while preying upon children. We must change the way BPD internal affairs works to ensure that this never happens again. Boston's path to safety, healing, and justice will include other policing reforms, including how we spend our tax dollars. My FY22 budget dramatically reduces police overtime expenses. To cultivate a police force that reflects the diversity of our residents, I'm making new investments to expand the police cadet program by 50%. This program removes barriers for candidates of color and creates an inclusive pipeline of talent. This effort will add 20 new diverse officers to the Boston Police Force. My administration will also be reviewing legal cases brought against the force for policies and practices that have already been discontinued due to disparate impacts on officers of color. We will also use housing to help communities heal from violence. When violence strikes at home, survivors, who are often young children, should not have to live at a crime scene. I've charged my Chief of Housing, Sheila Dillon, with developing supports to safely relocate families that have been impacted by homicide. We must reimagine how we respond to crisis in our city. Parts of that includes a planning process for how we respond to mental health crisis. I've asked Chief Long and Chief Martinez to deliver a pilot plan in 90 days to amplify the role of mental health clinicians and reduce the role of police officers in responding to mental health crises. Today, Boston begins a new chapter. As mayor, I will lead a new era of police transparency and accountability. I'm dedicated to ensuring safety, healing, and justice for every resident in all of our neighborhoods. Thank you, and now I will take a couple of questions. So the Internal Affairs file is currently in our law department here and will be released by the end of this week. What has happened in the last 25 years, I hope to learn more through an investigation with the Office of Police Accountability and Transportation, an investigation not just on this file, but on other internal affairs files. When it comes to this file, we have to ensure that we don't compromise the criminal investigation that is underway with DA Rollins.
Was not your to have support?
So it is really important that we protect the identity of the victims in this case. This is obviously triggering that traumatic experience. So this is why the law department has the file, and we will do everything in our city to be sure to protect the victims in that case. Moving forward, it is important that this never happen again, and that we ensure that there is accountability and transparency in how we do business.
This is a 6-month deadline for the Boston Police Reform Task Force recommendations that we sent out for all of them. Can you give us a status on what's been implemented other than the OPA?
So the question was on the task force recommendations. The first recommendation was to establish this office, which I have committed $1 million of the FY22 budget to do so, and have announced the executive director who will begin later this month to do this work.
Your police department budget is just under $400 million. There's been some criticism that cut isn't deep enough and that it's less than your own call last summer for a 10% reduction of the force's budget. What do you say to that criticism?
This budget moving forward does call for an almost 5% cut. To do much deeper than that would only exacerbate the overtime that people seek to eliminate. There is 10% of the force that is out on sick leave. Part of that reduction, calling for a third of the overtime budget to be cut, will require that we all do our part, and it will also require that we look at the number of officers out on sick leave. Those who are able to come back, we certainly want to help them do just that. We hope to get that out by the end of this week. The law department has it now to review the file and redact any information that can compromise, that could reveal the identity of the victims. By the end of the week, those will be released, yes. So it is important as we build trust in our community, particularly in communities where trust has been broken. We have a lot of work to do together as a team. That is why we are here with the Chief of Public Health, the Chief of our Police Department, to ensure that we are working together as a team, all committed to transparency and accountability moving forward. That was the last question. Thank you very much.